Please make your way to the main stage where the LAMI workshop will begin in 1 minute. 1 minute until the beginning of the LAMI workshop in the main stage. Thank you.
So, hello everybody, welcome back. We are nearing the end of our first day, but one major workshop to come now. LAMI is a very important area. The area of language assessment for migration and integration is a very important area that Alte provides a lot of attention to. And it has to be said, with the help of Lorenzo and Cecilia in particular, we have made great progress, I think, in this area at providing documentation of relating to policymakers in this area. So, I would like to welcome Lorenzo Rocca and Cecilia Hamnes Carlson to the stage, who will introduce the session, and then they will also introduce Brian North, who is also with us for this very interesting workshop, and we're looking forward to having your participation too. So, Lorenzo and Cecilia, are you there? Okay, I'm not sure if they're there, but Brian, you are there.
Yes,
Lots of things. Excellent. So if we're having trouble getting Lorenzo and Cecilia on, then maybe I will hand over to you straight away then to start your presentation. So the theme of the LAMI workshop is uneven profiles, what it is and why it is important. And Brian, we're particularly glad to have you here today to kick this session off with a presentation, the introduction to the theme of uneven profiles. So we're very much looking forward to what you have to say about that. So I'll hand over to you now, Brian, to begin your presentation, and hopefully you also have control of your slides there as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hello everybody. I'm just going to check that this actually works going forward and backwards. Yes, it does. And the point to think about is that every time you say somebody is B1, you're actually talking about it's a convenient summary of a complex profile, a complex uneven profile. And people don't want a 5-minute answer when you say, what level is your German? B1 is a more convenient answer, but it hides, an uneven profile. This is recognized with the European language portfolio, where you're asked to profile across 5 different areas. There's no global appreciation. And also with Europass, there. You can't read it, but that's an example of a Europass. And there in the middle, it says that my French is kind of for reading and listening, it's C1, and then for the other, it's B2. So what do we mean when we talk about uneven profiles? And basically, we talk about, we mean several things. We mean being able to understand a language but not speak it, or being able to use spoken language but not written, and to use the language in certain domains but not others. So if we take the first point, this has been called various things at various times: receptive plurilingualism, intercomprehension, receptive multilingualism, and lingua receptiva. And it is the convention in Switzerland, when you have meetings at a national level, that everybody speaks their own language and is expected to be able to understand the others. Also, on this kind of theme, it's not a new idea to recognize uneven profiles. At the beginning of the communicative movement, with the first communicative tests, which were produced by Keith Morrow, with a specification which was part of a Council of Europe project, you were able to take separate tests for each of the 4 skills, and you got 4 different certificates if you took all 4 of them. And later in the 80s, at the Arles and Oxford preliminary and higher examinations, the Arles examinations just did listening and speaking, spoken language, and the Oxford examinations just did written language, reading and writing. So you see, at the beginning of the communicative movement, there was quite a strong presence of recognizing uneven profiles. And Cambridge also always give out a graphic profile to show the unevenness of the profile of the person concerned. Then the second aspect of what we mean by uneven profiles is to do with the quality of the language, really, and the situations in which you're able to use the language. And here a very useful distinction, particularly in relation to immigration, was made by Jim Cummins at the beginning of the 1980s, where he talked about the distinction between basic interpersonal communication skills and communicative academic language proficiency, pointing out that immigrant kids tended to get bounced out of language support programs when they demonstrated basic BICS, basic interpersonal communication skills, when what they actually need is cognitive academic language proficiency in order to pass tests in school. In terms of CFR domains, basic interpersonal communication skills is concerned with the personal domain and the playground in terms of the public domain, whereas cognitive academic language proficiency relates to the other 2 domains, primarily occupational and educational. And the point really is that immigrants don't need to have a very developed level in occupational and educational domain unless they're going to be a doctor, in which case they will have taken something like IELTS. In terms of the CFR, there's a very big distinction between descriptor scales, which reflect BICS, which reflect language as a natural phenomena. You know, being able to understand a person talking to you, take part in conversation, have informal conversations with friends, or repair a car or put up a shelf, as opposed to a lot of the other scales concern cognitive skills that are learnt skills that are learnt through education and training and experience at work, like reading for information and argument, addressing audiences, formal meetings, note-taking, writing reports and essays, etc. So you could say that it would not be unreasonable to say that tests for immigrants should be focusing on BICS and not CALP. And then if we turn to the CFR itself, how are uneven competencies presented in the CFR? And we'll have a look at this first in relation to the CFR in 2000, the 2001 CFR, the original, and secondly in relation to the update, the 2020 update, the companion volume. So if we look at the way that it's represented in 2001, a framework including both, meaning the CFR, a framework including both horizontal and vertical dimensions, so all these different categories, plus the scales, the levels for the vertical dimension, facilitates the definition of partial objectives and the recognition of uneven profiles. And in fact, it's stated somewhere else that this is the reason why the CFR contains so many scales, is in order to help people to develop differentiated profiles for different purposes, needs profiles. Hans-Jörg Krum was one of the first, in reaction to the publication of the CFR, pointed out that this was a really important issue in relation to immigration. And the provisional version of the CFR, which was used for piloting, actually contained a needs profile, which was based upon an earlier scale called the Alte scale, what was part of a discussion of this issue. But unfortunately, that got dropped in the published version in 2001 because it was considered to be too complicated. If we turn to the CFR 2020, the companion volume, the same sort of thing is said. The reason the CFR includes so many descriptor scales is to encourage users to develop differentiated profiles. Descriptor scales can be used first to identify which language activities are relevant for a particular group of learners, and then secondly, to establish which level those learners need to achieve, to accomplish in that area concerned. And there are a couple of examples of needs profiles. One is for CLIL, and the other, this is the CLIL one, and there's another one for academic, taking an academic course as an undergraduate. And if you see here that people are not expected to be able to do everything. Out of the 80 odd scales that are present in the CFR, there are on this diagram, there are about less than half of them, and the jagged edges of the graphic shows that it's not necessary to be exactly the same level in all of those things. There's another profile given in the CFR of a plurilingual proficiency profile, and you can see that in this particular case, it's not uncommon for somebody's strengths to go across languages. So this particular person is obviously very good at reading and not so good at writing, and that translates over across different languages. This is not an unusual phenomenon. But most of the time, when we talk about uneven profiles, we, as with the portfolio and with Europass that I showed at the beginning, one wants to restrict it to a reasonable number of categories. Otherwise, it gets out of control. So here is the example that's given in the companion volume for a profile in one language, where you see that it's profiling overall oral comprehension, reading comprehension, oral interaction, written interaction, oral production and written production, and mediation. And it's not unusual for people to have a very uneven profile across those areas. I'm not aware of any recent research which talks about what proportion of people have a flat profile and what proportion of people have an uneven profile. But I can remember some research in the 90s which showed that in terms of writing, about 2/3 of people have a very noticeably uneven profile. So, to conclude, very few people, even highly educated people, have flat profiles. They are not as good. They're not one proficiency level in all of the skills. They're better at some things than they are at others. This was recognized in communicative examinations during the 1980s, for English at any rate. This was particularly useful if you were, as I was, Director of Studies of a language school at that time, teaching English, because we had a lot, this was in Bournemouth, and we had a lot of students from the Middle East, and they had great, they obviously were much better. They had it, because of the difficulties with the script and with things like articles, etc. They found it, they were able to demonstrate a much higher level in listening and reading than in writing, or a much higher level in relation to ARLS, the listening and speaking exam, rather than the Oxford exam, which was reading and writing. So the presence of these examinations, which separated out the skills in this way and enabled them to get a certificate which would attest their proficiency level in what in the spoken language, was a great benefit to them. And the purpose of the CFR scales is to facilitate creating differentiated need profiles in this way. And finally, as an immigrant, and I'm speaking from personal experience, having first of all moved to Switzerland and now having moved to Italy, as an immigrant, you need to have a considerably higher level of listening and speaking than you need reading and writing. And writing really is the last skill that you need, because you can always get somebody else to help you to do it. So that's the message basically from the CFR, that the suggestion that one should take account of these issues in designing tests in general, and that it is particularly relevant when you're talking about tests which may be used for immigration, permanent residence, or citizenship. Thank you very much. Well, I'm glad to see that somebody liked it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So, first of all, apologize for the technical problems, and I would like to thank a lot also on behalf of Cecily, Professor Brian North, for his contribution and for having accepted to be the keynote speaker in this LAMI workshop. So thanks a lot, Brian. It was a pity that we couldn't introduce you in a proper way, but at least we managed to thank you at the end of your very appreciated contribution. Thanks. Thanks again.
Thank you.
And welcome. And welcome again to all to the LAMI workshop on behalf of Alte LAMI project group, here represented by its two chairs, myself, Cecily. And thanks so for having decided to mark this event down on your calendar. We hope the next 1 hour and a half will address your expectation. I don't know if you can hear me in the way, because
Lorenzo,
I will go on, but I'm not sure because can you hear me now? Okay, now I think it's better. I don't see. Okay.
Yeah.
Graham, can you?
Graham, I can hear you, Lorenzo, fine. Yes.
Okay.
So Lorenzo,
now
please go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to say some few words aimed to better introduce LAMI, in addition to the ones both Valdemar in presenting the Alte principle of good practices and Graham already said. LAMI. LAMI stands for Language Assessment, Migration and Integration, and was formed in 2002 with the hope of representing a platform for language testers and in supporting their attempts to ensure issues of test fairness and social justice within the migration context. According to the Alte general missions of sustaining diversity and maximizing impact. Please take your time in the following days to visit the LAMI section in the Alte website. Here you can find what we achieved in the last 20 years in terms of results, events, publications, for instance. Well, and I would pass from this very basic LAMI introduction to the introduction to its workshops for today in terms of mainly logistic. After the presentation we had from Professor Brian North, that was very useful to introduce us to the theme, to the topic of the uneven profile, you will be divided into groups according to your interest in addressing the specific subtopic proposed. Group 1, the subtopic is uneven profile and low literate migrants, and you will move together with me to room 1. And group 2, the subtopic is uneven profiles and language requirements within the migration context, and you will move together with Cecily to room 2. I would underline that we have to physically leave the stage and walk our avatars to either room 1 or room 2 via the teleporters. The two groups then will work in parallel following the same agenda. First, around 10-15 minutes are provided to allow Cecily and I to introduce you to the subtopic, explaining contents, aims, and also instructions for the provided workshop tasks. Then you will be automatically and randomly divided to small groups of no more than 6 participants. And after the 6 participants in each group will work till 6 o'clock, when you will have to move back to the main stage for the final roundtable, anticipating the closing remarks. In doing your work, you are asked to use related handouts. We hope you have already printed or downloaded in order to have ready a copy to hand. And okay, now I think as well as you, I'm leaving the main stage. I'm going to room 1, and you'll do the same, or to room 1 or to room 2.
Great, thank you, Lorenzo. Okay, so let's move. As Lorenzo said, please actually move your avatars either into room 1 or room 2, and we'll see you there in a minute. Thanks.
For those of you attending the LAMI workshop, this is a reminder to now leave the main stage and take your avatars via the teleporters in the main exhibition hall to either room 1 or room 2, where the workshop will continue. So again, please use the teleporters in the main exhibition hall to room 1 and room 2. Thank you. The Lamy workshop is now continuing in room 1 and room 2. If you have not yet joined one of the rooms, please may I encourage you to make your way there. Thank you.
Okay, welcome again to the more practical session provided by the Lamy workshop. In fact, in the next hour, you are requested to do some tasks I'm going to explain, as well as Cecily is going to do with the other group in room 2. In our case, the aim is reflected by the title of this first slide, and so is to reflect to what extent is more than possible, I would say highly needed, to relate the uneven profile as concept just expressed by Brian North within the migration context, and more specifically take into account the no-literate and low-literate adult migrants. As North highlighted, the normal case is represented by the wavy yellow lines rather than by the dashed red line. In principle, uneven profiles are simply infinitive, and everyone has an own profile or profiles. We know this. It is, for instance, the immediate outcome of the engagement with the CFR self-assessment grid, which allow each of us to create, in fact, multiple wavy lines according to our plurilingual repertoire. However, one can argue that maybe some profiles are more common than others. For example, it could be true that generally is more common to perform better in the receptive skills than in the productive skills, or that it's common the case that the written production is more challenging than the spoken production. Although in his presentation, North used the example of B1 related to this slide, the same holds true, of course, with A2. A key level today in very European, a lot of European countries. I'm now referring to the last Council of Europe and Alte report on language requirements I conducted together with Cecily and Bart Dijkert. The report underlines that A2 is the mostly provided level for migrants who aim to residency permit, long-term and short-term, and in several cases also to ask for naturalization. It means that in many countries, policymakers make compulsory the A2 test, as you know, and to make their life in some sense easier, they use the imposition of an N2 summary, just the convenient summary underlined, highlighted by this slide, without giving the fair possibility to test takers trace the uneven and wavy line in second language. So the A2 as a whole, with only few countries setting differentiated requirements that Lamy is deeper investigating in its current project plan as possible outcome, as possible goal. The not wall A2 can be described thanks to the CFR, descriptors, scales, and maybe even more now thanks to the formalization of the new pre-A1 level in the CFR companion volume. That's to say that it's impossible to detect some temperatures on the left of the slides, absolutely common within the migration context, where the uneven profile, as you know, is often represented by a higher spoken language in comparison to written language, according to the daily use of the host country target language. But we start to have serious problems when the temperature goes below A1 and below pre-A1. So when we have to deal, for instance, with the more uneven profiles of low literate adult migrants, with it is no rare, are A1 or A2 in relation to oral dimension of the target language, so listening and speaking, together with a written dimension, reading and writing, that is not possible to describe at all by using the existing European frameworks. Same problems, or maybe increasing problems, when the spoken language also stands below A1 and pre-A1 for speaking and listening. Therefore, there is clearly a need for LASLIAM. LASLIAM stands for Literacy and Second Language Learning for the Linguistic Integration of Adult Migrants. It aims to describe a parallel process of literacy acquisition in second language. It's a Council of Europe project conducted on behalf of the Education Policy Division by a team of experts that would like to greet, as probably they are attending this workshop also. Fernanda Minutz, Karen Schramm, Roland Hebb, Ann Curvers, and myself as LASLIAM co-authors. LASLIAM is a reference guide complementing the CFR and the CFR companion volume by implying two main switches from a generic and fully literate social agent to adult migrant, not literate or low literate social agent involved in any case within a learning environment. And the second switch is from can do in terms of proficiency to can do as expected learning and teaching goals. So at the end of a teaching process within a formal or also non-formal learning environment. It's to serve designers of curricula, teaching materials, assessment tools, and portfolios, defining potential teaching goals targeted to sustain migrants in communicating within the social tasks they want to need or perform in their daily life. Also, for this, it's important to remind, as LASLIAM, according to its acronym, is fully embedded within the LIAM project, again, from the Council of Europe Policy Division. All descriptors have been scaled at 4 levels, from LASLIAM 1 to LASLIAM 4, and are to be used for describing profiles, which might be uneven in the various competencies. LASLIAM 3 partially overlaps with CFR Companion Volume 3A1, as the slide highlights, and LASLIAM 4 partially overlaps with CFR and the CFR Companion Volume A1. So LASLIAM strongly assumes the concept of individual profiles, and which implies that learning goals are assumed as independent the one to each other. Therefore, the descriptors are not codependent in the sense that learner might be at level 1 in certain can do and level 2 in or level 3 in other can do. The slides show the structure of the reference guide with its chapters, from the definition of target users and learners to the rationale of the work, and from what means teaching language literacy in the target language to the scales, from how to use LASLIAM for curriculum design to the suggested use related to the assessment in the learning environment. We are going to concentrate our attention on chapter 4, more precisely on a sample of the scaled descriptors. The concept is based on teaching experiences and curricula in the various countries, has already been revised according to international experts' feedback and to the results of 19 qualitative workshops across Europe that involved last autumn also some Alte members and Alte institutions. A large-scale survey is currently in place to provide a final validation of the scales that will be published by the end of this year. So the scales descriptors are now within the quantitative validation phase started this month. That's to say that the sample you will work on in a while is still provisional, as it is the version revised in the light of the qualitative workshop we already had, but we are waiting for another last update according to the results of the current survey. And let me take this opportunity to promote a bit this phase of the project, so the current phase. If you are interested in participate to the survey, please contact me via mail in the next days. There is time till the 12th of May. LASLIAM provides 52 scales with descriptors for language activities and strategies, as well as for technical literacy and digital skills. So 3 main columns in the first degree of the diagram you can see. The workshop tasks I present in a minute, in terms of content and instructions, are focused on language activities, specifically on spoken and written interaction. As in CFR Chapter 4 and in CFR Companion Volume Chapter 3, all the communicative language activities are structured in overall scales and specific scales related to categories. In addition, for each specific scales, LASLIAM provides examples for the 4 domains, so private, public, occupational, and educational. You will work on 2 handouts, as said, taken from spoken and written interaction. More in details. The first handout contains 2 out of the 6 overall scales, and the second handout contains 2 out of the 22 specific scales. The ones related to categories goal-oriented cooperation and online-offline notes, messages, and forms. The quotation on the top from the CFR explains the aim, in my view, of the whole tasks. The partial competence in a given language may concern communicative language activities, but it may concern also just a particular domain. Well, the proposed task should increase our awareness in this sense. As they. Structure and logistic of the tasks. As said in the opening, you'll be divided into subgroups of no more than 6 participants. Each subgroup will work in its breakout room on 2 tasks for around 45 minutes without interruption. I suggested to dedicate the first 20 minutes to task 1 and the second 25 minutes to task 2. Then at 6 o'clock, like the midnight for Cinderella, you are asked to go back in the main stage in order to share feedback, also involving the other group with Cecily. But before starting in dealing with the tasks, each subgroup should nominate a coordinator, and it can be also the same person, a group rapporteur. In fact, we would be happy to hear from you during the final roundtable, as well as, if you want, nothing is compulsory, of course. In a second moment, it would be precious for us to receive by mail a sort of report of the activities of your group. However, taking into account the high number of participants, I would anticipate that probably it would be not possible to give the floor to each rapporteurs during the final roundtable. We are sorry for that, but we think there is no way. Okay, here the instruction for task 1, as written also in the handout 1. Imagine to work as a teacher. You have still to start your literacy and second language course, so the parallel process I explained before. You are engaged within the welcome phase, and there is placement, of course, to placement test to be provided. You are asked to develop progressive tasks for this placement test. As practical activities, choose only one of the proposed scales, so or written or spoken interaction, and write the instructions related to 4 possible progressive tasks, 1 for each of the LASLIAM level. starting from Lasliam 1 and ending with Lasliam 4. Again, or for spoken or for written interaction, according to the descriptors you will find in the two overall scales. Here, the instruction for task 2, as written in this case also in handout 2. Imagine again to work as teacher. You are now engaged within your literacy and second language course, and as a result of the previous placement test, you have now a small group of learners with their uneven profiles. Lasliam 2 in particular in written interaction, and just for example, Lasliam 3 in spoken interaction. During the course, the needs of this small group of learners are focusing more and more on the public domain. According to such needs and to the uneven profile, you are asked to develop language activities. As practical activities, fill the two proposed scales with the missing descriptors related to the needs and to the uneven profile of your small groups, so involving Lasliam 2 and Lasliam 3 for written and spoken with regard to the public domain. And once filled the scales, develop the instructions for one, or if you have time, two communicative language activities, or for Lasliam level 2, in this case, written interaction and public domain, or for Lasliam level 3, spoken interaction and public domain. If you have time, both of them. In wishing you good work, I would conclude by saying you that now you have nothing to do technically. In fact, I hope you are going to be inserted automatically and randomly within a subgroup. But at 6, please I would like to remind you to leave this room and physically walk your avatars back to the main stage via teleporter. So the same thing you did to go from the main stage to this room 20 minutes ago. Thanks again for your attention. The activity in the breakout rooms can start. So I would ask to the stage manager, please split the participants, and thank you again for the attention.
Join session.
So it's us?
Seems so.
Just checking. This is Anna Mouti from Greece. And,
yes. Hi, Hannah. I'm Simona from Italy. I thought I saw a lot of people, a lot of participants in the room, so I was expecting much more people.
Yes, to tell you the truth, I don't understand when we check in on the participants. I think it's all the participants, not divided in the room.
Not divided in the room. Okay.
But not sure, and I don't know how many breakout rooms have been.
Okay, I don't know either. So, and I realized just now that I didn't download the handouts, so I was doing that right now. Has any of you done that already?
I do have this. Do you have it? It's
yeah, I just downloaded it. Unfortunately, I'm also not using my PC because I had some problem with the 3D, so I had to borrow a PC. But
yes, I'm also with not mine because I could not be so virtual. But
no, the same. I had a few issues with mine, so I had to borrow a PC. But now I I've just downloaded now, and I'm trying to open it. Just a second.
And now the colleagues is Safis and Sofia. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm checking also on the, on the forms that and probably we will start with the task 1, yes.
Yeah. So I just sent it to my PC now, so I can open it and I can see the documents while I'm also talking to you. But is it just me and you, Anna? Are Sophia and Satish there, or is it just the two of us?
Yes, I don't know, just...
Ok, so... Ok. Ho mandato anche al tuo indirizzo email. Sì, ce l'ho.
But it was really interesting, this virtual, for me it was the first time that I, experienced this kind of meeting or conference, so
it's nice. Just I had a lot of stress because first I was like half an hour with the technical assistant, and then at the end they concluded that my PC couldn't connect, so it was very stressful. I entered at 2, like 1 hour later. I should have tried this morning, but I thought I would have no problem, so it just caught me by surprise.
Well, I did it this morning, and I was feeling like, being part of a video game and Second Life platforms and things like this. But
straight into the future, I'm sending.
Yes, this is the future that I was telling. This